Good morning or afternoon, guys, wherever this message finds you, and thanks for tuning in to Harvest Clinic's week 4 video for January. This was the last week that we're going to be still talking about New Year's resolutions, and I think even coming up until this week, I sort of thought, oh, look, I don't know if everyone's getting tired of the New Year's resolutions talk. But it made me sort of think this is what happens with New Year's resolutions themselves, is that we start off with this kind of literal like firework, like a bang, like New Year's Eve, we're ready and with something that we want to do differently, very passionate. And even as the month wears on, not even the year, but as the month wears on, stuff comes up that gets in the way, and eventually we find ourselves starting to move away from some of those things that we had been so passionately connected to at the start. So in today's talk is a little bit different. It's not just me. I'll be actually discussing with a colleague of mine. Her name's Carol-Walden. Michelle's one of the psychologists and supervisors on our team who has worked with us for a couple of years now. And in this conversation, Michelle and I discuss the things that get in the way of following through and keeping to New Year's resolutions. If you haven't already checked out the content from the year so far, you can do so through our YouTube link, and you can view the stuff that we've already done on New Year's resolutions. But today's conversation is really about 3 things that get in the way of our New Year's resolutions and following through with our New Year's resolutions. And number 1 is just daily life. We talk about how daily life and the things just that we've got to do every day can get in the way of us actually doing anything new. Number 2 is habits. Comfort-seeking behaviors, stuff that we have almost well ingrained into our daily routines, some of which we might not even be aware of, but how these habits and how habitually we do them can get in the way of us following through with a New Year's resolution. And the last one we talk about is a really important one, how this one simple word, fear, and what your mind tells you you can and can't do can be such an obstacle to actually following through with something that you really, really care about. We're going to look at those 3 things, and we're going to talk about what to do, something you can do about each of the 3. So if this is a topic that interests you, I hope you enjoyed the last segment on New Year's resolutions today. And then next month, as we begin, next week we'll be starting February, and next week we're going to actually begin to talk about a whole new topic of relationships. February being the month of Valentine's Day, I thought it was a good opportunity for us to start to talk about relationship health and how to improve the relationships that we have in our lives. So all the best. I hope you enjoy this content, and as always, please reach out to us if we can ever help. We have a team of psychologists ready to connect with you, either for the short term or for the long term. The door's always open. So just visit our website, www.harvestclinic.com.au, and we look forward to connecting with you. All the best, and thank you very much for joining us on this journey of exploration and learning. Let's talk about some of the things you've found can hijack or get in the way of your own or even clients that you've worked with, the best intentions that we have. What was the first thing that comes to your mind?
Daily life in general, Rick. So just the fast-paced daily life, family, just trying to live day to day. We sometimes have lofty expectations that don't always match our day-to-day life and the pace of it. So that certainly would be at the top of my list.
Well, let's talk about that one a little bit, because it sounds like you're saying that really, and I can resonate with that when you're focusing on setting up New Year's resolutions, it can almost be like an unrealistic perspective when you're just looking at the thing you need to be doing more based on the thing that you weren't doing last year. It sort of takes out of context everything else that you have to juggle in your life. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what happens. We get a bit of a tunnel vision happening about a particular goal that we want to achieve. Say it's weight loss or something, and we make it stand for everything. We make it the priority in the moment without considering the other factors and variables in the equation. So, and in particular, like I'm mentioning, the day-to-day living aspect and the pace at which we live that life. There are so many variables to take into consideration, as you say, with New Year's resolutions and values to consider. But yes, definitely I've seen the routine of day-to-day life get in the road of that, of those resolutions.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess we're talking about all things to do with anything that you have as routines, whether it's to do with your family, kids, or just simply work and all these things that take up time. So here we got one. Maybe what we can do is maybe we can break down three. There's three things that
Sure.
kind of get in the way, and then we can maybe look at some ways that people can navigate them. So one of the things is just the practicalities of life, and I can absolutely relate to that. Setting up ideas
Definitely.
on. I said I want to do. There's this thing, right? I don't know if you ever heard of this thing called a muscle up. Have you ever heard of a muscle up before?
No, I
It's
haven't
like
actually.
okay, it's kind of like a pull up, right? But instead of
Okay.
just a pull up, once you've pulled yourself up, it's developing the strength to kind of flip it so that your body kind of goes above the bar and then you push yourself up high, if that makes sense. So I've
Yeah.
had this resolution, and I've bought the bar, because I don't have a good pull up bar. So I've bought one, and I want to do one by the end of the year. And yet,
Yes.
how many pull-ups have I done by the 17th of Jan? Zero, Why? Because there's just so much other stuff I've got going on. So I can relate to that. I look forward to talking about what we can do with that, because yes, I don't know if I'll get to the muscle up. So what is another obstacle, a hijacker, something that other than just the daily routine, if that's not in the way, what else do you see can come in and kind of hijack us from the direction we really wanted to head this year?
Habits. So coping mechanisms, I guess, that we use in day-to-day life to get through those stressful moments. So habits can be a barrier in attaining what we really want.
Yeah, habits. And when you say habits, can you give us what might be a habit, like in as an example, that's something that gets in the way, something you've seen, habits that people have that get in the way of their best intention?
Screen time is a good one. So how much time are we spending on the social media, on gaming, and getting lost in that, or TV or movies or what have you?
Yeah, and as you said that, it just makes me think, because I know, I know that experience of screen time and anything, in a sense. It could be food, it could be just anything. And I guess what I see that they all share in common, what they all share in common is kind of like they help me to feel normal. When I'm doing these things, there's this kind of baseline of normal. And as long as I keep them up, as long as I have my cup of tea before, or sweet thing before going to bed, like these are routines that give me a sense of normalcy. But the whole thing on setting resolutions is that we're trying to step out of normalcy into something a little bit different, just a small practice, but something a little bit different. So I guess what I hear you saying is that if we're doing everything to maintain that baseline level of what feels normal through our screen time and all these things, that it's going to come naturally to do that. It's going to be hard to add anything different, right, to that routine.
Definitely. And also it's quite insidious in a way too. These type of habits, they do give us a sense of normality, which is lovely, but they're a comfort. We do them to comfort ourselves, and they even release a level of oxytocin, so that enables us to feel good, and it's addictive, right? So it's got another arm to it, I think, as well, Rick. That makes it even a little trickier sometimes to create that distance and to be able to step into a noticer space and notice it with that honesty and objectivity that's so important in that. That word comfort, you're right. It definitely brings about that sense of comfort. And I guess you see that, again, comfort is not bad. Most of these habits are not in themselves bad. But if we're trying to if we're trying to move towards something good, and comfort is often about kind of just reducing our sense of discomfort, in a sense of reducing our sense of distress and stress through the day, unwinding. We use those words. So it's kind of like,
if we're wanting to strive towards something new this year in terms of a behavior, one of the things that kind of is a what we're invited to do at the same time, you could say, is to be able to hold more lightly the need to kind of create constant comfort in our way in our life, in a
Yes.
sense, right?
Yes. Yep.
Mm,
So sitting with discomfort, it's always a hard thing. And as you said, it's not about, well, that's it, no screen time, no mobile phones, or no sweet chocolate or cake or
mm,
whatever. It's about doing it in balance. But these type of things can hijack, as you say,
mm.
goals that we might set ourselves on New Year's.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And that's it. This is a great point. So we've got daily routine, lifestyle things. We've got habitual behaviors, things we do to kind of keep us in a state of equilibrium and balance, but that really are obstacles. Is there one other thing you can kind of comment on that happens? Even maybe we can do something internally now, so, from a thought, feeling, area, something
Yeah, I was
within
thinking
people. Yeah. What do you kind of see in that in
that.
that regard?
Fear is a big one.
Okay.
So fear can sort of get in the road. Now, fear can trickle down and be more about anxiety. But the fear of having to make that leap to fulfill that resolution, to make that change, because change is always hard for us as human beings. So fear can get in the road of us taking those steps towards that change that we want to make, that choice we want to make in our life.
It's a big one, and it's an important one because sometimes, as you're speaking, I'm thinking that people like we sometimes prefer, that saying, you prefer the devil you know than the one that you don't. Like, even though you do not
Yes.
like your current circumstance, at least you know it, and to step outside of that. I sometimes say that fear is not anxiety. It's not a disorder. It's more of a natural experience when something of great importance can't be guaranteed, in a sense, and therefore it's going to create that uncertainty for you because it's very important, and yet you might not get it, in a sense. So there's going to be apprehension and things, and yet fear
Yes.
is this natural experience then in that moment. But our natural response to fear is to therefore not do it, to run away from the thing that's fearful. And so even the best intentions that we have, these New Year's resolutions, whatever it is, as I'm thinking about it's just a bit of a silly one, but to do one muscle up, I'm thinking, there's a fear of falling short. So I could almost dilute that New Year's resolution to kind of, just do 10 pull-ups, and that one I know I can achieve. So in a sense, fear fear is an obstacle, not just from not doing it, but also from not really setting the resolution that you really want to be setting, in a sense, by diluting
Yes.
that down, right? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It's very mobilizing, and
Mm.
it, it certainly prevents us from taking those steps towards something that's really important to us.
Absolutely. So let's kind of now just talk quickly on, like, I guess the how one thing that people can do. If people's daily routine is getting in the way of setting of kind of following their New Year's resolution, what's some options for them?
I think the very first thing is to look at what their New Year's resolution is, and to ask themselves two really important questions. Who's important in that New Year's resolution? So is it themselves? Is this about someone else in a relationship? So who is this going to be important for?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's important about it? Is this about my health and well-being? Is this about creating that connection with someone very close to us? Is this about satisfying a need or a want that we've had? And the want could be something as as simple as a sense of adventure, and connecting with certain places and certain communities. So I think they're two really important aspects, and it's something that I talk to my clients about. Bring it back to the values base. Bring it back to what is the driving force behind it for you.
Knowing the foundation of what this is. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking, well, I don't really have one because it's not about health because I'm exercising anyway, but I realize, no, I do. It's really for me, this silly kind of New Year's resolution is about kind of, I guess it's about learning to kind of continue to practice self-discipline in my life and continue to practice growth, and it's actually doesn't matter about the resolution itself. It's actually what it reflects, what it represents, is an opportunity to continue this commitment and discipline, these sort of values that I do value highly. It's an area to do. So one of the things we're saying is by knowing the foundation in a sense, then how does that help with dealing with the daily routine stuff that gets in the way?
I suppose the thing is, once you understand the value base, then it's about firstly identifying what is getting in the road. So this is where you will start to notice those barriers that we've just talked about. So it might be daily living stuff. It might be daily life and routine. It might be habits, and then it might be fear. It might be all three. But the idea is to first get that values and a sense of it, and then in that noticing space, step back and identify what are the barriers. What are the mental barriers? What are the emotional barriers? What are the behaviours that are getting in the road of me reaching this very important place that I'm trying to move towards, this direction I'm trying to travel?
A good point. And maybe as we keep talking about the habit side of things and fear, we can kind of clarify more, because it really, it makes sense that really there will be lifestyle things that you have to do that you are already maintaining that are probably equally important to the New Year's resolution that you put in. We can't get rid of everything else and we just focus on this one thing. But by seeing perhaps the value behind it, it can hopefully then we can look at what's getting in the road, what's stopping us from actually doing this thing, and in turn start to make some practical calls on what we can achievably do towards this thing, and be realistic about what we can actually contribute. Instead of jogging every day, it might be just once a fortnight, but at least be realistic about what keeps all the values that you are trying to pursue in your life in harmony together, and not creating this over focus on the new one.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
What about the habits? What about when we've got habits? Like screen time is a big one. It's amazing how, one day we can talk about the psychology behind it, but how addictive it can be to just constantly be seeing something new. We've never had something like this in the world, where you can just endlessly continue to find stuff to stimulate, and stuff that's interesting and funny and all this stuff, right? There's just an endless amount of stuff to access. So that's just screens. Obviously, there's other habits, but where do we start with kind of addressing our own habits, especially when we're not even aware of what they are?
I suppose the first thing is to get that awareness. So in identifying your barriers, and if you notice, for instance, screen time is a big one, then it's about looking at, okay, so, trying to dissect it a bit and analyse it. So how much time am I spending on this? And what's it getting in the road of me doing, especially in terms of the value, the New Year's resolution that I've developed, and the values base behind that? How's it impacting on that? So trying to figure out the time, trying to figure out the ways and that it is impacting on that value and that goal, and then understanding what it serves. So we don't, as human beings, we don't engage in these activities meaninglessly, with no point, no purpose behind it. There is usually always a purpose behind it. What is it that it's fulfilling? So
Yeah, I
screen
love
time
that.
could be a multitude, of things.
Mm.
As I mentioned, it's addictive for starters, but furthermore, as I mentioned before, it's also a comfort-seeking thing. It
Mm.
releases levels of oxytocin. Every time you get a like on a social media post, it's like another little bit of oxytocin gets released, right? Like it's very addictive. So
Mm.
trying to unpack it and see what is that actually serving. Uh, as you mentioned, it's not always negative. It's a way to connect with your community, with other people. So there's good components to it too.
Mm.
Seeing that component as well. But usually what you'll find, if it is robbing you of getting to your values and getting to your New Year's resolution, there are components that are not helpful, that are unworkable in it. And so
Mm.
it's trying to understand that and seeing it
Mm.
in perspective.
Yeah. It's kind of like just starting with just really looking at it again. Almost kind of, it's funny because when we look at the screen, we don't actually realize we're looking at a screen. So what we're kind of doing here is just stepping back and looking at what we're doing and asking ourselves the question, what is this intending to do? What is the intention of this activity that I'm doing? And then the second question, like you're saying, is sort of how is it actually in the proportion that I'm doing it? How is this actually working for me? How is this actually working for
Yeah.
me overall in the proportion that I'm doing it? Is it still working to give me the life that I want, or has it now kind of like most things in the right proportion? Like, you have a bit of salt in most cake recipes, they ask for like a half a teaspoon of salt, but if you overdid that, the whole taste is changed. And I guess it's kind of that idea of with the habits that you have in the proportion that they're in, how's the overall taste of your life still tasting? And if it's not if people can kind of watch this and say, this isn't tasting the way that I want to taste, it's not in proportion. I mean, just quickly, like what's the step for them, from this, from realizing that a habit is not in the right proportion in their life?
Uh, I think it's about then asking yourself, well, what is the right portion? Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
what is in service of my values? What's workable around this? What proportion is going to be workable? It's not
Mm.
necessarily eliminating as we're suggesting. It's about getting the right serving size, I guess.
Yeah, getting the right teas. That's it.
Yeah,
That's it. Yeah, what is the right thing, and actually knowing what that is, and then I guess like
yeah,
I
and
talked about.
experimenting with it.
Yes, exactly
Yeah.
right. It really comes down to then just commitment and choice, in a sense. Like you might not feel motivated to give up screen time. If you wait for that, you might be waiting a long time because it is comforting, but it's kind of choice, in a sense. Okay, let's get to our last one, which is probably the big one, is dealing with fear and apprehension when it comes to New Year's resolutions.
Mm.
Dealing with the internal voice, that tells us either we're going to fail or it's too hard or what will people think or how will they receive this change that I'm going to make or whatever it is, what's how do we handle that real, very real experience?
So that fear, it's really about firstly acknowledging it, understanding the tentacles that feed it. So usually there's certain thoughts that you're fused with about yourself that
Mm.
feed that fear. As you sort of mentioned, how am I going to do this? I'm not feeling confident with this. So understanding those components. And then
Mm.
it's learning to sit with it. So in ACT, we talk a lot about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. It's a very foreign concept, I think, for a lot of people, but it's a
Mm.
really important one. It's learning that, you can make space for this in your life. Understand it. Understand what that fear looks like, where it sits in your body,
Mm.
what feeds it.
Mm.
And then, even though you don't like it, and let's face it, no one likes it, are you willing to make space for it if it's in service of something that's very important to you? If it's
Mm.
in service of that value, if it's in service of your well-being or someone that's really important in your life.
Mm.
So
Mm.
learning to sit with it and making space for it.
Yeah, because it's kind of like the experience of fear or other uncomfortable emotions like it are going to show up, and
Yes.
and if our kind of life is led that we only pursue the things that we value up until these things show up, it's kind of like going on a hike. You know, you're driving right now to go camping, and so if we're driving to a hike
Yeah.
where you're looking forward to all the things you're going to do, and then you start walking, but you only walk the direction you want to walk. But when you reach this river or whatever's in front of you, this muddy puddle or whatever, if your only approach when fear shows up is to turn around, then your ability to actually pursue the journey that you want to go is always going to be limited by the experiences that come up. So here you're kind of saying, in fact, we don't have to get rid of fear, but what we're addressing is our natural inherent reflex to need to turn around as soon as it shows up, and actually realize our bodies don't die when we get wet, so to speak, in the same way that our behavior isn't. In other words, we don't lose control. We don't disintegrate when we do something in the presence of fear. In fact, it's still just as possible. It's just that we are experiencing, instead of being dry, we're experiencing a new experience of being wet. It's like just a different experience, not pleasant necessarily, but absolutely possible, right?
Definitely. Fear, but it actually serves a really important purpose, as you and I both know. It allows our body to regulate in moments where it feels overwhelmed and in threat. And if we are not actually in imminent danger and threat, our body will learn to regulate accordingly, and we'll be able to engage other parts of our brain, such as the prefrontal cortex, which enables us to problem solve and to reason and to resolve the discomfort and the apparent issue that's facing us. So sitting with fear is a really important thing. Learning to sit with it. It enables us to be able to engage our executive functioning and problem solving more readily when we learn to sit with it.
Wow. Well, because what you just said just made so much sense, that when you do actually go into the thing that you fear, like kind of like that puddle of water, or that big pool of water, you're so fearful of the experience, but if you can go into it, once you're in it and you kind of realize that you're still okay, now you can start to problem solve what kind of stroke to do or how to swim. In a sense, the fear sort of is not really the main thing anymore. Now you're sort of just surviving in it and navigating through it, so that you're almost teaching the only way to teach your body maybe not to fear is to actually have the experience of what it dreads and realize that you're actually still floating, you know, that the thing that you sort of thought would happen. It's the only way is to actually be in there, right?
Yeah, it's a very powerful thing when you learn to sit with it. And I'm certainly no expert in doing it myself. I still struggle in moments, but when I have allowed myself, it's very liberating and freeing.
Yeah, to have and perhaps this can be, you know, this can be something that we come back to at another time when we can just talk even two things from today. We can talk about helping people to kind of deal with, you talked about understanding the tentacles of your fears, in other words, dealing with the thoughts that come up in our minds, and then we can actually probably do a second one on how to deal with what it means to actually sit with emotion. I think many people watching this would probably be saying, that sounds great, where do I start with that? And we can actually probably open that up for people as well. Sounds good, Michelle. Well, thanks for this. Has broken it down simply. I appreciate, you know, having the chance to talk about this, and look forward to doing some more of this down the track. But enjoy your camping trip. And we'll see you on the other side.